Good afternoon. You're watching It's Not Me, It's EU with me, Jack Bottomley.
And me, Manat Chandel.
Coming up on today's show, a senior academic expert explains the ins and outs of the EU.
The impact leaving the EU will have on sport and local community.
And oppositions come close to blows in a heated debate. But before we get into that debate, let's have a look at what it's all about.
Some of you might not be aware of what's happening, so we went out to find out your views.
I don't really know a lot about the EU, to be honest.
Well, I'll vote to stay in the EU. I mean, I need to do my proper research, but I can't imagine me wanting to come out of it or voting to come out of it. So.
It's more about things to do with the economics and obviously currencies when you're travelling abroad and the difference and whether you need visas to get in and out of different places. But in terms of the day-to-day impact, I'm not all that sure.
I don't really know much about it, to be honest. Being in uni, I don't have TV, so I don't really listen to the news that much, so I can't have no idea.
A large number of the population aren't aware of the key issues surrounding the referendum.
There are more than 2.3 million students in the UK, and the lack of know-how about EU could potentially reduce the number of voters.
Our reporter, Sophia Ratcliffe, gives us a rundown of the facts and figures.
David Cameron won the 2015 general election on a pledge to hold an in-out vote of the UK's membership with the EU. A referendum is basically a vote in which everyone or nearly everyone of voting age can take part, normally giving a yes or no answer. Whichever side gets more than half the votes cast is considered to have won. The EU referendum will be held on Thursday, 23rd of June 2016 and will ask British voters this question. Should the United Kingdom remain a part of the European Union or leave it? But how will this affect students? Here at Nottingham Trent University, there's a lot of international students from every corner of the globe. So how will it affect us? I spoke to senior lecturer Mandy Ball to get to the heart of the key issues. This is a complicated topic with a lot of different layers, so what exactly is the EU referendum all about?
Okay. The UK has been a member of the European Union since 1973, which is obviously part of a now 28 state body. It's about whether or not we want to be part of that or not, and all the advantages that go with that, of course, and some of the disadvantages that go with being a member of that particular group.
There are multiple governing bodies in Europe of which the UK is currently a part of. If we leave the EU, which bodies would still affect the UK?
Regardless of whether we're in the EU or not, we would still be, for example, a member of NATO, which is the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, which is for defence, and we'd also still be a member of the European Council, and it's the European Council which has got, I think, about 48 members in, which provides us with the European Convention on Human Rights, of which, of course, Britain has the European Rights Act. So that would be unaffected by whether or not we're in the European Union or not.
Specifically speaking of the Erasmus programme, we have students coming in from other countries as well as leaving the UK to study elsewhere. How would leaving the EU affect both of these movements?
There are tens of thousands of students, of UK students studying abroad, regardless of Erasmus. Obviously some go on an exchange programme, but some now increasingly choose to do a 3-year, 4-year degree course abroad because it's cheaper in terms of tuition fees. There are tens of thousands of UK students who've chosen to do that. Clearly that avenue would close down for them, and similarly the enriching experience that we have at universities like Nottingham Trent of having students from other European countries come here to study for a semester or a year. Obviously that we would no longer be part of the Erasmus scheme because that's an EU-funded system.
And how would leaving the EU affect current students in the UK?
There are kind of 3 or 4 key areas. There's obviously free movement, there's the trade. Over 50% of our trade is done with other EU countries. I suspect for people of student age, the key thing that's going to affect them is living and working abroad. At the moment, there are about 1.4 million Britons who live and work abroad. And of course, at the moment, you can go not only study abroad, but you could go and take a job in another EU country without any problem whatsoever. That will end. Basically, you won't have the free movement to be able to, you'd have to apply, you'd have to maybe get a visa. It's a slight unknown because what will happen is if we do vote in favour of leaving, Britain will have to start negotiating with other countries within the EU to kind of have reciprocal agreements. We don't know what they're going to look like at the moment, but clearly it won't be what it is at the moment, which is free right of entry with your UK passport to work, live in, or just retire to any of the other EU member states as it is at the moment.
European delicacies are easy to come by, but this June this may not be the case.
Agriculture in Britain may be improving, but 40% of its food is still imported, with the majority coming from Europe. Walking through the streets of Radcliffe is enough to know how popular Eastern European stores are in Nottingham.
Local shop owners are concerned about the future of their businesses should UK decide to leave the EU.
It's going to affect us directly because we get all the stock, all the things directly from Poland. Like we have our transport and everything. And we honestly think UK should stay in the European Union because if they went out, then the trade would stop or decrease because people wouldn't be sure what to do next. So it's not good for the economy. I don't think it would solve anything to leave the European Union now. Economics-wise, migration-wise, I don't think so it will solve. That's why the future would be uncertain if they left.
Another issue for students is Erasmus, as leaving the EU will affect European students wishing to study abroad.
Nottingham Trent University is a university that recognises the importance of diversity and international mindedness. There are roughly 250 UK NTU students who study abroad in Europe every year, and approximately 550 full-time EU students studying at NTU. European students are the second largest group of international students. Without them, the university would see a significant loss in their income.
The income that Nottingham Trent receives from European students, I mean the country as a whole, it's about £1 billion a year in fees for students, and you think if universities lost that amount of money, where are they going to get the students from to make the fees up? Yeah. So being in the EU for Nottingham as a city, in the last 16 years we've had 100 million for regeneration projects alone from the EU. So where Nottingham Council would get that money from, I have no idea, and that's what makes Nottingham such a good city as it is now.
The Erasmus programme provides students wanting to study in Europe the opportunity to do so. They also have access to non-means tested funding. If we left the EU, students would then have to fund themselves. It would also deny students wanting to come to the UK, like Giuseppe, of an invaluable opportunity.
United Kingdom was not part of the European Union when I applied for my master that I'm studying now. I probably would not consider UK as a country where I could study. I appreciate a lot the level of education that I think it's so much higher compared to Italy, and that's the main reason why I came here.
The EU allows for easier mobility, access to funding, and freedom for students to work while living abroad. But do these outweigh the disadvantages?
Personally, I think in terms of students, just in that respect, I think the benefits definitely outweigh any negatives that there might be. All of this is kind of hypothetical at the moment because we don't know exactly how it will affect us. But I also think that it may make the UK less appealing.
With competition for jobs higher than ever, companies value students with cultural diversity. Without experience abroad, it is now in question whether our students will have the ability to compete in the global market. Eleanor Rice, CBJ News.
Join us after the break and see how our EU status will affect sport.
And our politicians come to blows.
Withdrawal from the EU would not only affect the economy, but would also impact football. Our sports representative, JJ Tia, has more.
Having recently been voted the home of English sport, it's clear Nottingham has a rich sporting history. With a Premier League ice hockey team, an international cricket stadium and 2 professional football clubs, we investigated at how work permits and the Bosman ruling could be affected should England decide to withdraw from the EU.
Well, basically, the Bosman ruling is the freedom of movement for football players now. Basically, the Bosman ruling came in and allowed players to leave a club on a free transfer. So before then, if a player's contract expired, he would have to, the 2 clubs that were in negotiations would have to agree a transfer fee for that player whose contract had expired to even move. So even if their contract had expired, they'd still have to be agreements with the 2 clubs. But now a player can just leave a club. The Bosman ruling has done wonders for football in the fact that it's allowed players like Robert Lewandowski to go from Bayern Munich to Borussia Dortmund to Bayern Munich on a free transfer, but it's also been a downside in the fact that smaller clubs are struggling to compete. Basically, work permits for footballers who are from outside of Europe wanting to move into European football, England, the Premier League, all the major sort of European leagues, they're required to obtain a work permit if they want to apply their trade into English football. So it's basically like getting a visa to move to America or Canada or something like that. Players from outside of Europe have to do that in order to be able to get a contract and become an employee of a company, a football club in Europe. And so in terms of England, in terms of the United Kingdom leaving the EU, it would be a very difficult subject, as you asked in the question. I think it would mean that we see the Premier League now as this such a light in terms of European football, where all young players from these countries, France, Germany, they're growing up and dreaming of playing in the Premier League. And if they now have to obtain a work permit, and it becomes a lot more difficult.
It's quite clear to see that if we were to leave the EU, there'd be two very different sides. The Premier League, which relies so heavily on European managers and players, may have to turn and look at their homegrown talents to build their squads around. However, without Europe's top players, the credibility of the league could fall, having an effect on revenue and consequences for all teams involved.
I'm joined today by Luke Walker, the Treasurer of Labour Society at Nottingham-Trent University, and Damien Smith, local organiser for Vote Leave. So Luke, if the people of Britain decide to leave the EU, what changes to the UK's membership of the European Union has Mr Cameron agreed?
Well, there's a 4-year gap now, so where EU members, where people from EU countries come into the UK, they won't be able to get benefits for 4 years. Though for children, it's mainly, they can still get benefits to your child, but it's mainly capped by how much benefits you can achieve from your country you originate from. Right. Also, we're no longer going to be part of any political union anymore. We're not going to integrate more. Mainly that's because Britain doesn't want to. We're more different than France culturally. We don't speak the same language. Though legally binding, we are with them, mainly for the regulations for businesses to be enforced by law. Also, when it comes to in criminal justice, we're able to apprehend escapees or convicts or anyone who's a terrorist who's gone into France. We're able to, if that country is able to locate them, we're able to bring them back.
But to bring Damien in, do you think these changes are enough that the Prime Minister's agreed? What benefits would we have if we just left the EU completely?
They're almost non-existent anyway, because the European Parliament can strike them out at any time without consulting the British public. So he essentially went and asked for a loaf of bread and came back with crumbs. And it's just, we think it's ridiculous on our side of the argument that this can actually be referred to as a deal.
And in terms of the people, a lot of people don't think they're getting facts. The scaremongering tactics are being used, especially by the in-campaigners. Do you think this is the right way to go about it? Would it not be better just to give the hard facts that are needed?
Well, yeah, scaremongering doesn't really work. Though they kind of justify it because it kind of worked with the SNP during the referendum for Scottish independence. They claim that unionists were scaremongering the outvoters to stay in. But the problem is, because the referendum's so short, it's not long away, it's quite short. Yeah. And without having a 2-year referendum campaign to lead up to give more facts, it's harder to broadcast all the facts to the people.
But that was, in fairness, the choice of the Prime Minister was originally 2017.
Yeah,
and he wants to stay in. He must feel that there's a reason why he wanted to bring it forward. Would you agree with that, Damien?
Yeah, I don't think scare tactics, it doesn't show any respect for the British public. It almost makes it seem like they don't know how to make up their minds. And I think one of the reasons they're being forced into scaremongering is because they actually don't have any solid facts to argue with, which is why when you pick up a leaflet from the Vote Leave organisation, there'll be hard facts and there'll be references, and you can see just where we're getting the information from and exactly why we're supporting the policies we do.
Do you agree with that? That's all you've got?
Well, the in-campaigns, all their sources for staying in, such statistics like every £1 we put into the EU, we get £10 back, or something like £10 back, comes from
Well, actually, I'd like to argue with that because Caroline Wheeler in the Daily Express said that in the last Parliament, we saved 47 million during the austerity cuts and spent £87 million just on EU membership. So I think in terms of figures, I think it's been proven already that we're actually not getting the money back that the In campaign likes to say that we spend.
We do have an advantage of trade, for example. 54% of our trade is through the EU. Would that not be a massive loss?
We don't have the trade with the rest of the world that we could easily do if we were outside of the European Union. And we could trade with the EU, because one of the scare tactics that the In campaign likes to chase is that if we leave the European Union, they won't let us trade with us. They won't let us trade with them anymore. But the World Trade Organization prevents that from happening, so we can trade fairly with the European Union.
The In campaign doesn't say that. They say if you leave the EU, basically, if you're going to join, you're going to trade with the European economic space, you have to either make a trade agreement, which it took Canada 7 years to make, or you can join it without the regulations such as tariffs.
Yeah.
But you then have to pay membership like Norway and Switzerland does. You have no way to influence what decisions in the parliament happens, but you get imposed by the rules, regulations, the law. But if you leave, then we don't have any influence on the parliament.
It's not just trade either, it's also immigration's one of the big issues that has been brought up. How would us leaving the EU affect immigration?
Well, it's pretty easy. I mean, this isn't really a point of debate. I mean, if your own nation has its control over its borders, we could decide what we want. I don't really think that's a point for debate. It's pretty obvious that if we wanted...
Do you agree with that?
Well, we have control of our borders. We're allowed to... 4 to 5,000 refugees are still in the border in Calais, and they can't get over to the UK. Also, with the EU member states, we have 711,000 people, who are British citizens, who work in the EU countries. And the free movement of people is beneficial because it helps companies for business people to move across nations to invest.
The reason that we are keeping the migrants back in Calais is because we have a separate agreement that's not an EU agreement.
Yeah, with France, and they've already said they'll tear it up if we leave the free movement of people.
Sorry to interrupt, guys. That's all we've got time for today. But thank you for joining us, and we'll have to see what happens with the referendum.
Thank you.
That's all we've got time for on today's show. It's not me, it's EU. Join us next time. Goodbye.